You ever have those moments in fighting where you just know, like deep in your gut, that you're watching the start of something historic? That's the crazy thing about this sport. Sometimes greatness doesn't sneak up on you years later. Sometimes it punches you right in the face the very first time you see it. And that's exactly what went down here, because this wasn't just some kid stepping into the octagon for his debut. This was the birth of a storm, the kind of fighter who changes the entire landscape without even saying a word. Just pure action, pure domination. And the second that cage door closed, you could feel the energy shift. Like everybody watching knew they weren't just seeing another fight. They were seeing the beginning of a legacy. And that's the kind of thing that locks you in because you can't look away. You're sitting there going, holy shit, if this is the first chapter, imagine what the whole book's going to look like. And that's why this story is so powerful, because you're not just witnessing a debut, you're witnessing the start of something that would go on to rewrite the game. And when you realize that, when you feel that energy, you know you've got to stick around till the very end, because this ride is just getting started. The thing about Khabib's debut that just blew everyone away was the dominant wrestling and that insane pressure, because from the very first exchange, you could tell this guy wasn't here to test the waters or feel things out. He was here to grab hold of you, drag you into his world, and never let you breathe again. And the way he closed the distance was so relentless. It didn't matter what his opponent tried to throw. He just smothered it, shot in, got a hold of a leg or a body lock. And once he made contact, you could practically feel the weight of Dagestan pressing down, the kind of pressure that makes fighters look like they've never trained a day in their life. Because that's the thing with Khabib. His wrestling isn't just takedowns. It's a system, it's a way of drowning you slowly. He chains moves together. And every failed defense just makes the next attempt heavier, tighter, more exhausting. And you could see it in his debut, the opponent's face slowly changing from confidence to confusion to flat-out panic, because when you're stuck underneath a guy like that, it's not just physical, it's mental torture. It's the realization that no matter how hard you trained, no matter how many hours you spent in the gym, this man has another level of control you can't replicate. And Khabib's pressure wasn't wild or sloppy. It was methodical, calculated, every movement serving a purpose. He'd trap an arm, shift his hips, grind his weight into your chest, until breathing feels like lifting weights. And then he'd chip away with ground and pound, not necessarily to finish you instantly, but to break your will piece by piece. And that's what made that debut so scary. Because here was a newcomer who didn't fight like a newcomer. He fought like a man who already knew exactly how to impose his will on the biggest stage in the world. And it wasn't flashy. It wasn't highlight reel spinning kicks or flying knees. It was fundamental, brutal, suffocating wrestling pressure that let everybody watching know this guy is a problem. And it set the tone for the career that was about to unfold. Because even in that first fight, you could see the blueprint for what was coming, a level of dominance that wasn't a question of if, but when he'd run through the entire division. What really stood out in that debut was the unstoppable ground control. Because once Khabib got his hands on you and dragged the fight to the mat, it was like quicksand. The harder you struggled, the deeper you sank. And you could see his opponent trying everything, scrambling, posting, twisting to create space. But every move just gave Khabib another opening to tighten his grip. And that's the thing that makes his style so suffocating. It's not just the takedown itself, it's what happens after. He pins you in these weird, awkward angles where you feel like you're stuck in a vice, and he uses his legs almost like a second pair of arms, locking you down while freeing his hands to smash your face. And you could see the helplessness setting in during that debut. The realization that no matter how explosive you are, no matter how much energy you burn trying to get back up, he's already 2 steps ahead, riding your hips, keeping chest pressure, digging his head into your jaw to make you uncomfortable. And it's brilliant because it's not just physical control. It's psychological dominance. When you realize you can't move, when you feel like you're being held down by a mountain, your confidence starts to erode. And Khabib knew that even in his very first fight, he wasn't rushing. He wasn't spamming ground and pound like some wild brawler. He was patient, strategic, softening his opponent, making him carry all that weight. And it was exhausting just to watch. You could almost feel the lactic acid burning in the guy's muscles as he tried to wriggle free. But Khabib kept gluing him to the canvas. And that's why people talk about him like he's something different, because ground control at that level is rare. It's a gift, but also a product of thousands of hours grinding on mats in Dagestan. And when you combine that with the composure he had, it didn't feel like a UFC debut. It felt like the arrival of a seasoned veteran who already knew he belonged. And that ground control was the clearest signal of all. This wasn't just a wrestler coming in to stall fights. This was a man who could completely dictate where the fight takes place. And once it hits the ground, you're in his world, and there's no escape. The thing that blew me away about Khabib's debut wasn't just the wrestling or the ground control. It was the mental composure, because you've got to remember, this was the biggest stage of his life. The UFC lights, the cameras, the crowd roaring. And for a lot of fighters, that moment is overwhelming. You see it all the time. Guys freeze, their timing is off, their nerves eat at them. But Khabib walked in there like it was another day in the gym, like he had been born for this exact situation. And the way he carried himself was unreal. Calm, collected, eyes locked in, no wasted emotion. And once that cage door shut, it was like he flipped a switch into pure focus. No panic when the opponent tried to fire off shots. No hesitation in his entries. Just pure confidence in what he knew he could do. And that's rare, because the UFC debut is usually where you see cracks, maybe a sloppy mistake, maybe an adrenaline dump. But Khabib was in complete control of himself, pacing his energy, breathing right, staying patient even when he could have rushed. And that's what separates a prospect from a future legend. The ability to silence all that noise, all those nerves, and just perform like the moment is smaller than you are. And Khabib had that aura instantly, that vibe of a man who doesn't get rattled, doesn't get starstruck. Because the mental side of fighting is everything. Skill only works if your mind can handle the storm. And his mind was like a fortress, nothing breaking through. And you could see the effect on his opponent too, because when you're in there with someone who's calm under pressure, who doesn't show fear or fatigue, it eats away at you. It makes you wonder, what is it going to take to shake this guy? And in that debut, Khabib answered that question loud and clear. Nothing was going to shake him. And that kind of mental composure is why people looking back can say, yeah, the greatness was already visible, because when you combine that calmness with his skill set, you're looking at a guy who wasn't just entering the UFC, he was announcing the start of an era. What's crazy about that debut is how instantly it shook up the entire division. Because usually when a new guy comes in, especially someone international who doesn't have a big hype train behind him yet, people are like, okay, let's see what he's got. Maybe he'll win, maybe he won't. But with Khabib, it was different. The second that fight ended, you could almost feel the collective reaction from every lightweight in the back thinking, oh no, we've got a problem, because it wasn't just that he won, it was how he won. That suffocating style, that mental calmness, the ability to dominate without taking much damage, and it sent shockwaves through the roster. Like, here's a guy who's not coming to point fight, not coming to squeak out decisions. He's coming to completely shut you down, and when you think about the lightweight division at that time, it was already stacked with killers, explosive strikers, crafty grapplers, veterans who had seen it all. And suddenly this Dagestani wrestler shows up and makes high-level opponents look like they don't belong in the same cage. And that impact is heavy because it forces everyone to rethink their preparation. It makes them go back to the drawing board and ask, how do you stop this kind of pressure? How do you deal with someone who never takes a backward step? And the truth is, most of them couldn't. And that's why his debut wasn't just a fight. It was a message, a warning shot to the entire division that the game was about to change, that there was a new kind of dominance entering the picture. And that's terrifying, because once a fighter establishes that aura, once guys start believing they can't stop him, the psychological war is already halfway won before the fight even starts. And Khabib built that aura right from day one. His debut wasn't just the start of a career, it was the start of an era. And the impact was so big that people didn't just see him as a rookie, they saw him as a future contender, a future champion. And looking back, it's wild, because that was exactly what happened. But the seeds of that dominance were already planted in that very first fight. And the division knew it was only a matter of time before he climbed to the very top. The wildest thing about looking back at that debut is how much it foreshadowed the greatness that was coming. Because in the moment, a lot of people just saw a young, hungry guy with crazy wrestling and endless pressure. But if you really paid attention, you could see the blueprint of a future legend right there in front of you. The way he never lost his composure, the way he trusted his skills, the way he imposed his game plan without hesitation. It was like watching a rookie who already carried himself like a veteran. And that's rare, man, because most fighters need years in the UFC to develop that kind of confidence, but he had it from the jump. and you could feel it. Like, this guy wasn't just here to compete. He was here to dominate. And that vibe, that aura, it was all over that first fight. And when you combine that with the stylistic nightmare he brought, it was almost like you could predict the story before it happened. You could see that if he stayed healthy, stayed disciplined, there was no one in that division who could consistently stop that pressure. And that's exactly what greatness is. It's not just winning fights. It's making people realize from early on that you're going to change the game, that you're going to leave a mark that lasts long after you're gone. And that's what his debut showed. Because it wasn't just about the techniques or the takedowns. It was the attitude, the presence, the way he made it look inevitable. Like, no matter what his opponent did, the outcome was always going to swing his way. And that kind of inevitability is the hallmark of greatness, because legends don't just win, they make winning feel like the natural order of things, like it's written in stone. And that was the vibe in that very first fight. The foreshadowing wasn't subtle, it was glaring, like a neon sign that said, you're watching the beginning of something special. And that's why when you look back now, knowing everything he accomplished, it almost feels surreal, because all the signs were there from day one. The dominance, the composure, the pressure, it was all a preview of the story that was about to unfold. And that's the kind of debut that doesn't just launch a career, it writes the first chapter of a legacy. And when you step back and really think about it, that debut wasn't just another fight on the card, it was the spark that lit up a career we all now look at as one of the greatest runs in the history of the sport. Because from the very first moment, you could see the dominance, the composure, the mental toughness, and the way he imposed himself on an entire division. It was all right there in the beginning, like a preview of the storm that was about to hit the lightweight world. And watching it unfold fight after fight, year after year, you realize that what we witnessed that night wasn't just talent. It was destiny. It was greatness in its rawest form, making its first statement under the bright lights. And that's why looking back is so wild, because the signs were there from day one. The aura was real, the pressure was real, and the impact was undeniable. And man, that's what makes this sport so beautiful. You get these moments where history quietly begins before anyone even knows they're watching it. So all I can say is appreciate it, respect it, and keep your eyes open for the next one, because greatness doesn't knock twice. It sneaks in when you least expect it, and then it rewrites everything. So good luck to everybody chasing their own fight, their own challenge. Keep grinding, keep pushing, because that's the spirit of this whole thing. And thank you guys for hanging out, for listening, for being part of this journey. I appreciate the hell out of you, and I'll catch you on the next one.